Welcome back to the freemilesmc. I am today here in Ireland in front of the Dublin Bay, and we're going to review one of the most British motorcycles, the Triumph T100 Bonneville. What an amazing bike. It was provided by a subscriber, friend and fellow YouTuber, Ferdia from the Unordinary Road channel, and it is an amazing bike. It has quite symmetric stats. It has 68 horsepower and 68 Newton meters of torque, with a single-sided front disc, and in comparison to the Interceptor that I own, a 19-inch front wheel instead of 18, and has a 865cc engine. I think this is a really nice bike to compare because I bought a Royal Enfield Interceptor on the used market, and this is a Triumph Bonneville from the used market. So before getting this bike on the road, let's hear a bit from the owner of this motorcycle, Ferdia.
Hi, I'm Ferdia. Thanks, Miles, for having me on.
My pleasure.
This is my 2014 Triumph Bonneville T100. I bought this bike in 2018 when it was 4 years old. It had 10,000 kilometers on the clock at the time. Since then, I've put on an additional 35k, commuting, city riding, country roads, bit of touring, bit of off-roading, you know, dirt, gravel roads, a little bit of everything, honestly.
Yeah.
So I've done a fair bit on this bike. I'm quite happy to talk about her.
Really nice, because your use has been very similar to what I did with my Interceptor, as I also used my Interceptor for touring, and I used my Interceptor for touring all the way through France and Spain, like you did. Took it on the occasional gravel road, and also used it close to the coastline, as you did here in Dublin. So we actually here have a quite comparable situation, with me having owned the Interceptor for 1 year, and you having owned this bike for 4 years. So. It's a really nice comparison, so you guys can see what bike to actually get on the used market.
Also, I bought this bike for 8 grand.
Yeah, and mine for four and a little bit of
exactly
something for extras. So it's exactly half, and we both bought from used dealers. So yeah, let's take the bike for a spin, and then let's have a discussion of what bike actually comes out on top.
Here.
Let's go. Let's get going, as I have nice fashion shoes here, as this was not exactly planned. Let's put a sock in true retro bike fashion over the two nice shoes. I actually have Ferdia's jacket on here, and let's say it's not really made for my physique, so I have trouble reaching my fucking feet. But we're almost good here. Okay, so Ferdia, let's see you in a bit.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. Okay. Really nice positive thing is that you put the key here in on the side. What is that weird beeping sound? Oh, just the alarm system. Nice. Okay, let's go. Okay. For not being carbureted, it starts a bit weirdly. So, also, first time on the wrong side of the road for me, actually, on a motorbike. You know, on a car it's easy, as long as the steering wheel's in the middle, you're good. So yeah. Actually, we at first intended to do a touring video and wanted to tour Ireland on motorbikes, but we couldn't rent a bike here. We planned on renting a bike from Harley Davidson, as their rates were quite cheap online, but when we walked up to the store, it was just a t-shirt store, and they didn't have any bikes for us, and and renting a bike in Ireland turned out quite difficult, so review it is. Already here in Dublin, I'm realizing the handlebars are a lot narrower than on my Interceptor, and yeah, why am I even in Dublin? I was visiting Ferdia, and also it was quite easy to get to Dublin, as kind of cheap Ryanair flights and good whiskey are the gifts of the Irish to the rest of humanity. So yeah, so we're now heading to a little mountain road close to Dublin, so let's go. The thing has some torque, you can definitely feel it. It feels comfortable in this like 1,000 to 3,500 range. Really nice. Until now, just like sitting on the bike is comfortable. I feel a bit the knee angle of the bike is lower, and for me sitting now on the bike at 6'5", it's alright-ish. It's alright. And from the hands I still need to get used to it, just because the handlebars are narrower. Also now getting here out of Dublin, it does the whole like moving between cars, city traffic thing. Alright, so we're now outside of Dublin on the small cross-country roads. Until now, the Bonneville feels really comfortable here. The ergonomics feel in the end a bit cruiser-ish. Like when Fredia first showed me the bike, it was standing next to a Harley Davidson Sportster that was falling apart, and it is crazy to see how similar the bike looks from, like, it's two bikes you normally wouldn't associate that much with each other, but like with how high the seat is, where the handlebars is, where you like actually put your hands to, like it looks so similar actually. So that kind of transports over here a lot. It feels more cruiserish, even though there are still, I think, two different cruiser variants of the Bonneville. Like I think there's the Bobber and and some Panamericana or some shit. You feel that the bike doesn't have an anti-hopping clutch, especially in comparison then to the Interceptor, and it's not as confidence-inspiring here in the curves. Of course, this is like really bumpy, really uphill, and yeah. Also, with the seating position, the bike transfers the bumps a lot more through your body as you're sitting a bit more cruiserish with your butt a bit lower. Shakes you through a bit more. Also, especially compared to the Interceptor, this bike forces you to cruise more. As now here with a completely open throttle, it kind of feels more comfortable below 5,000 RPM. And like, if you want to, you can push the Interceptor, and this one kind of tells you, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this, basically? I would say the bike feels more characterful, but what at the end of the day means characterful? Oh shit! I just realized the bike shows the speed in miles an hour, and I'm constantly speeding. Oh, fuck. This is not kilometers. Shit. Should have realized that earlier. It's like, whoo! The speed limit of 50 is quite high here. Yeah, of course it is. Ireland is especially beautiful. What a nice country to test ride this bike in. Yeah, the bike feels more characterful per se, but what that means is it feels more bumpy. Like, it doesn't like give you that much. The suspension is softer, yes. It is definitely like it is less forgiving, even though the suspension is softer and doesn't make your butt hurt as much. Ooh, what a nice little car. What I mean is the suspension feels softer in the sense of you don't feel the bumps as much and everything, but as soon as the bike then is on the road, it starts to feel quite bumpy, kind of like how you imagine like really old bikes in old like black and white films when that look a bit faster than usual because of the film technique from back then. Kind of how that ride looks, that bumpy kind of feels. But I mean, that's the style that this bike is going for, so can you really fault it for it? So in general, more bumpy and less confidence inspiring than the Interceptor, definitely. Of course, when saying that the bike is in that regard less confidence inspiring, you also need to keep in mind the bike is a bit older. It's from 2014, and like how confidence inspiring in the handling it is, it's for me one of the things that you get to feel first when the motorcycle is aging. But the exhaust note is really fine though. Also, like when you go downhill and then get off the gas, you have like little misfires. Also, when riding the bike, the cockpit looks nice. We like the fuel gauges. I don't like that there is no chrome around them here, and also not on the back side of them. So, all in all, the Bonnie is quite a bike, and we're going to have the discussion how it holds up against the Interceptor in a minute. First, we're going to take in this last view on the Dublin Bay here. Nice.
Sláinte. So, come on, how did you find it?
It's a really cool bike, all in all, like typical classic motorbike. How it rides in general. Like, of course, me as someone who owns the Royal Enfield Interceptor, I have to say it rides softer. It definitely rides softer. It has a more cruiserish feel. You can feel that the frame is a bit built narrower. it eats up more of the bumps, but this cruiser-ish feeling more definitely comes through. Earlier, when we first had a look at the bike, it sat next to a Harley-Davidson Sportster, and you could see just how similar those two bikes are in position. And also when riding the thing, it feels so bumpy. I mean, that could of course also be due to the Irish roads here, but yeah.
Yeah, our roads are not good. How did you find it in the corners?
In the corners, yeah, in the corners it was a bit sketchy actually. It felt a bit sketchy. You can feel the frame bend. It's a very similar experience to sitting in an old French car that feels like it's made out of rubber.
Yeah.
And especially compared to the Interceptor, because the Interceptor feels stiff. Of course, yes, you have to occasionally like wobble in the handlebars, and if you try to keep up with a MT-07 or a Kawasaki in the curves, you kind of can, but occasionally you have the occasional wobble in the Interceptor. But with this, it feels downright sketchy.
But you know what that is, right? That's the traditional keeping the 1970s true classic British motorbike experience, you know, as Triumph says on their website.
Yeah, but it feels a bit like they're making up for a bit of poor craftsmanship. Also, like if you look at the brakes, because the brake feel downright sketchy. You have this feeling of you want to brake, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, it's actually not doing all that much, and then all of a sudden it locks up. So the bike is terribly underbraked, I have to say.
For sure, and it's a heavy bike.
Yeah, it's a heavy bike,
and it's not powerful. Like there is a bit of pull there.
Yeah,
you need more braking power to stop this bike, I think.
Yeah, and I mean it is more powerful than the Interceptor, definitely. You can feel the difference in horsepower. I would say it feels roughly about the same until 70, and then this thing keeps pulling, and that's also the area where you then want to have more sufficient brakes. And I think you can get away with a single disc in the front.
Yeah.
But
it needs to be a higher caliper than this.
Yeah.
So
And I've
really cheaped out.
And I've also ridden like bikes that had single front discs that were able to properly brake. I mean, of course, we very quickly get into the area, is it a bug or a feature? Because the bike feels sketchy to ride, but that is part of the whole charm and character.
Sure.
And the whole charm and character and how bumpy the bike feels is different to something like the Interceptor. Because with the Interceptor, it feels like, oh yeah, a bike from how you imagine a bike from the 60s, 70s to be. I don't know if you know those old movie recordings where they go over like a grass mountain and it looks super bumpy. Yeah, that's how this feels actually.
And that's definitely a bug.
Yeah.
It's definitely a bug. Like, yeah, sure, keep the styling, keep the heritage, whatever that is, but there's no excuse not to have a modern bike. And when I say modern, I don't just mean, you know, state-of-the-art technological developments such as disc brakes, fuel injection. No, we need more than that. That's not cutting it anymore.
Yeah, and I mean the bike is from 2014,
sure.
and it's for people who look at the used market, who are potentially either want to get something like the Interceptor used for around 4 to 5, or this for 8. I just looked up. I actually saw one for 7,700 something. So the prices are like still quite up to date there. And I have to say, for a 2014 bike, it's the sketchiest thing I've ridden. It really is. And
I learned to ride on this bike.
Yeah.
And I think it's, from a certain point of view, you could argue that is a good beginner's bike because it's not overly powerful. And yet it teaches you to ride. There's no like rider aids on this. You've got to learn what braking is. Yeah. You know, and if you want to stop it.
I started on a 90s sports bike, and I've kind of come from a similar point of view here. Sure. And you could definitely start on this bike, but it has to be said that is not the safest option. It is absolutely not.
As you can tell, I've spilled out on this bike. You can tell from
you crashed the bike like 4 times?
3 times. Twice on this side, 1 on that side.
Yeah.
Never fast, but you know, just early rider mistakes, like learning not to lock up.
Yeah, the bike is really not forgiving there. As I found out when riding the bike doesn't have an anti-hopping clutch, nothing like that. So the Interceptor definitely would be the safer bike. Even though, of course, you live more on a bike that gives you all this feedback, even though you can say, yeah, it feels sketchy and whatever. Who wants to ride a bike that's not kind of sketchy? That's what riding a motorcycle is half about.
Who is this bike for?
Yeah.
Again, it's not really designed for young guys to take out and, you know, wring the neck on it. It's designed for, you know, people who have a bit of money to spare and want to take it out on a sunny Sunday afternoon for you know, a potter around the countryside.
And I mean, it really has this cruiser feeling as the bike literally rattles itself to death above 5,000 RPM.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm still like with how the frame behaved also like when going over all the different bumps, like the something like those speed bumps, they're fine. Like the bike would also probably handle a gravel road like really fine. Yeah. But then when the road becomes bumpy and you need to change directions on a bumpy road, I feel like the bike really shows me my weight.
And like, that's riding here in Ireland. Our roads are not good.
Yeah, like
we have terrible roads actually.
I feel like every time I rode the bike over a bump in a curve, the bike basically was telling me like, lose some weight, you fat fuck. Basically, because like
he says drinking a Guinness at 11 in the morning.
Because you could feel the bike bend underneath me, and that was not a good feeling.
No, she squirms around, and you can feel her bending. Like it is a long, narrow frame.
Yeah, so it can be concluded that the bike like feels very different to something like the Royal Enfield Interceptor, as that more feels like a naked bike-ish retro bike experience, and this more cruiser-ish. Even though there are even cruiser variants still that would make this even more cruiser-ish. But let's be honest, people who look into these bikes buy these bikes not for the performance and not really for the riding, but for the looks of them. It's the looks, because to be honest, the Triumph and the Interceptor get outperformed by bikes that cost just as much as them.
But I mean, just look at it.
Yeah.
Is that not one of the most beautiful bikes?
It is a really gorgeous bike. Yeah. Like also, it is a really gorgeous bike to look at, and to, if you like ride on it, you see someone riding on it, it's very beautiful.
And the sound.
Yeah, the sound. I would say the sound is even better than on the Interceptor. Also, but especially when getting off the throttle and the thing has like the slight misfires, and it's just like, really good. But I feel like it's beautiful in a bit of a different way, as the bike also looks a bit more cruiserish with the lower thing, and I also feel like the 19-inch front wheel makes a huge difference there, and also with the little support beams on the wheel. It just leads to a little bit of an older look. Yeah. Even more than the Interceptor. But like the parts that this bike is built out of, it's actually really comparable to the Interceptor actually, because everywhere where Royal Enfield used on the Interceptor some plastic, they used plastic here as well.
Fenders.
Fenders, blinkers, and everywhere where it matters, then is chrome. Except at the front of the instruments, they put black plastic on them, which I don't get. That's actually one of the few visual drawbacks of this bike, in my opinion. Like one of basically the only one.
Mm-hmm. But we were talking about your chrome experience with the Interceptor.
Yeah, I actually said already in an earlier video that my Interceptor tended to rust, and you guys gave me a lot of shit for that. And I'm going to disappoint you, I'm going to do that again. When I had the Interceptor, I take care of my bike roughly every 2 weeks, and for around an hour, as like spending 4 hours on polishing all the chrome, even though you could do that and the bike would look a lot better, is not realistic from like how you actually own a bike perspective. And I tended to get rust on the chrome itself, little flying rusts and little points of rust, and very bad rust in the end of the exhaust. And then when we were like chatting, and I use Neverdull on my bike, and we found out like you live next to the sea. Use Neverdull, occasionally clean the bike, and the bike looks good after 4 years. You can definitely say that like the chrome, of course now you see also that the bike lives close to the sea, yes.
There's wear on it, there's weather.
There's wear and weather on it, but it definitely holds up better than the Interceptor. I mean, to put this into context, I feel like I'm the only guy saying this. Many people on YouTube say that the Interceptor holds up just as much. So I want to give that perspective out there as well, as I can also just be wrong. But in my experience, it doesn't hold up as good as the Triumph that we have here, and also as the Japanese bikes. So this definitely does that area better. Also, like not just the chrome, also like all the rubber, as the Interceptor is using some natural caoutchouc type stuff, and all the little rubber bits start to break really early, and everything here on this bike is intact. And also the paint, I mean, now the paint on your bike has a few scratches, as
that's the history of the bike.
As you also crashed the bike, but like the paint on my Interceptor started to already wear a bit. I mean, I can still polish it out, but you can see the lower price point of the Interceptor there, absolutely. So that's kind of what €4,000 there gives you.
Is it worth it?
That is actually a really good question, because even though I'm bitching about the Interceptor, I would still say the Interceptor really could be the better bike, as The bike, even though it's not really supposed to be driven very quickly, it still feels comfortable above 5,000 RPM, and you can, with the occasional shake in the handlebars, hold up with your friends who ride proper naked
What's the top
bikes.
speed on the Interceptor?
65, 70-ish, probably a real 60. That's what the speedometer said while really going at it downhill. So I would say 160.
Okay, yeah.
This is 190,
She
right?
tops out about 190, yeah.
Which, I mean, that only makes a difference if you're breaking the law or living in Germany. So, yeah.
For sure.
Mm.
Yeah. So that
But you can feel the more power above 70 and then properly above 120, I feel like, on this.
I would agree with you. For
Yeah.
that extra, $4,000, I'd probably go with the Interceptor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would too.
Yeah.
As we said, the only reason you buy this bike, if you have that amount of money sitting around, is because of the looks, the
Yeah.
styling.
But
Yeah.
actually, something that could actually speak here for the more expensive Triumph is, you told me you bought this, you financed this bike through a bank.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is normally
I bought this bike when I was
Yeah.
21.
Yeah, which
and
is
I
normally
paid
not
it back.
advisable for people with motorbikes, but as this is your only form of transportation, you actually managed to increase your credit score through paying this
For
bike
sure.
off.
Yeah, yeah.
Which actually can be, like, if you look at a motorbike, that can be a factor you
Yeah.
can, like, factor in.
No, look, as a young guy, getting that bank loan, paying it back over 4 years, on time.
Yeah.
In my personal life, that was an achievement. That was.
Yeah, actually, one thing that we almost forgot, where the Interceptor has the Triumph Beat. The Interceptor comes with a toolkit. This bike does not.
You get an Allen key.
Oh, you
You
get
get
an Allen key.
one Allen key.
One Allen key.
Yeah.
And you also the maintenance itself seems to be probably easier on the Interceptor, as for example here the spark plug is not really easily reachable, so changing the spark plugs could be a pain in the ass. But I still think this bike, from what I read online, is quite easy to work on yourself, and
it's
you
very
also did
standard.
your own
It's
oil
standard.
changes and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
all in all, two different bikes that sit like 4,000 euros apart from each other on the used market.
Yeah.
Of course, the Triumph has the cooler brand behind it, and you
does
kind
have
of
the
pay.
name.
It has the Triumph name. It holds up longer. It doesn't rust as much. It has more power.
Yeah.
But all in all, I would say if you look at owning a bike for a really long time, it kind of is a decision that you have to make yourself, in the sense of, are you okay with your bike suffering more from corrosion? Also with the polish of the chrome. We just talked about rust. The main issue here is polish of the chrome. So there can be made good arguments for the Triumph, and all in all, it's a really good bike and really satisfying to ride. I would say I would go with the Interceptor.
I would too.
Yeah, for that
honestly
money.
would too.
But I think if you would like the Triumph, you don't have to feel bad about spending the $8,000
If you have it.
if you have it.
If you have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. If you're a long-haired, earring-wearing, Guinness-drinking hipster like we are,
Yeah.
and you have that amount, then it does call to you, because you see this bike across the street and you're just like, wow,
Yeah.
that is a sexy bike.
Yeah. It's a really good looking bike.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I would not have been able to finance a bike like this. So that both options kind of exist is really nice.
Yeah.
And also you have to keep in mind, for the used price of this, the Interceptor I think now currently sets around 6 or 7. They have gotten a bit more expensive.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it really much comes down to personal choice, how much you want the bike to hold up over a long
Of
time,
course.
basically.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that was my review on the Triumph Bonneville T100, and also a bit in comparison to the Royal Enfield Interceptor, as I think those bikes are quite close on the used market. And if you have a bike that you would like me to review, feel free to send me an email. And thank you for Ferdia to join me here
my
today. And he also has a YouTube channel, Unordinary World.
Check it out.
Check it out. Yeah, and all in all, what a beautiful bike, and thanks for having me here in
Cheers.
Ireland over a Guinness.